Hey artist friends, it is time for our October edition of the Mixed Media Menagerie Challenge, a little collaboration between Laura, Erin, myself, and a guest artist every month. This month's strange collection of things includes ink, a fountain pen, and Cut It Up, and I grabbed this pile of supplies along with that to complete my journal pages. So I'm starting this month's video kind of already a work in process. I'm saving you from the mess that I created before this point. I thought that I would be smart and maybe pre-doodle on my pages with my fountain pen and some ink. I didn't like what I did. I tried to gesso over it. The gesso turned blue from the ink. And yeah, it was a mess. So then I decided, well, I'm going to have to try to cover up that blue gesso. I ripped a whole bunch of these pages from my House of Books subscription kit to cover it up and tried to embed them with gesso. I actually really ended up enjoying this process. It was very tactile to me. It almost felt like I was paper macheing something, which probably makes sense because gesso is a combination of glue and a plaster of Paris. And those are kind of similar to what you use for paper mache. And so I'm doing the same. You can kind of see the mess when I flipped it here. Same process. I'm adding a bunch of gesso as my glue and putting down these pages and just completely layering them up to try to hide that blue and the mess that I had created. And now I'm just tracing a little triangle out an area I think I'm going to cut it up out of my journal page to kind of keep that in mind as I add the next layers to my pages. Next, I'm adding spray paint through one of my favorite stencils on all pages of this spread, including that little flap that I'm hoping to cut out. I wanted the pages to be cohesive so that when I cut the flap out, it'll kind of disguise itself because it will match with the other pages. That's why I haven't cut it out yet. Now I just sprayed some of that spray paint onto a book page here, and I'm going to add some water to it and use it to kind of grunge up the pages. I like to use the same type of medium that I've already used to kind of soften the edges of that spray paint, add some drips and some grunge to kind of attempt to figure out what I'm doing here. Since my first step kind of flopped, I'm a little kind of like shy in figuring out what I want to do. And last month I felt like my mixed media menagerie kind of flopped too, so I'm adding unexpected and not necessary pressure to myself to make these pages kind of cool this month. And now that spray paint and all my grungy drips and splatters are dry, I'm grabbing a glass dip pen and my Noodler's black ink. Now technically this isn't a fountain pen. I will use a real fountain pen again towards the end. I'm just using this process to kind of like clear my brain and do some journaling and doodling on these pages, kind of figure out where I'm going to head next. And I love the texture, the sketchy texture, and the mark making this process is adding to my pages. And while I'm doing that, I'll just remind you that all of the supplies will be linked below. If you've never used ink or a glass dip pen, I'll have what I'm using linked below so that you can get those as well. So in my head right now, I am thinking that I'm going to keep these pages 100% black and white or shades up, including some grays here and there. So I'm using that Noodler's ink. I grabbed a paintbrush and I'm kind of spreading it on my pages a little bit. I used a pipette to pull it out of my ink bottle so that I wouldn't contaminate the ink. And now I'm going to grab that pipette and add some big splashes and get a little bold and daring here in just a minute. You might gasp when you see, there you go. There's a few more of those coming. I'm just having fun with it, adding a bunch of grunge, drips, and splatters to my pages. I had to wait for that left side to dry before I flipped the page, and now I'm doing the same thing here, being very bold, brave with that pipette and paintbrush and adding some huge splatters to my pages. I wiped a few things off I wasn't happy with, but then I loved the grunge that added to the pages as well, so I'm glad that I made a few little extra bold splashing mistakes. When I create art journal pages or things on canvas, I like to make sure that I push and pull things to the forward and pull them to the forward, push them to the back. And so now I'm grabbing this gesso watered down a little bit to push some of that stenciling and those bold ink marks to the back. Right now it looks like all of that black is like floating on the top. So I'm trying to anchor it down just a little bit with some white gesso on top. So right now I'm finding out that creating these journal pages is going to be a long, tedious process because as I create on one side, I have to wait for it to dry to flip it to create the next or do the same thing or process on the next pages. Now that I have gesso on both pages and they're both dry, I'm cutting out that flap that I had penciled out in the beginning. So I'm going to be completely honest, I am just really going with the flow here. I don't have a huge idea of my topic or subject or what I'm trying to create. So as those ideas come to me or those potentials or possibilities, I'm just going to go with them. And I thought, I might want the same kind of flap on that left side. So before I attach this flap to my journal, I just traced it on that left just in case I wanted to do something with that same shape. I'm not sure if I'm going to use those lines or not, but they're there in case I need them. Now I grabbed some washi tape and I'm going to stick this flap down. I got that triangle all aligned there and added a little bit of washi to hold it in place, and now I'm just going to add some washi on the front and the back of it. First I'm going to secure it down here, and then I'm going to take that washi tape off, flip my flap. I guess I'm trimming it first. Once I'm done trimming it, I'll take that washi tape off that I used to secure it. It did peel some of my pages back, no big deal. I'm going to use some matte medium and fix that, add some gesso, disguise it. My pages are so grungy and messy, it doesn't matter. Now I'm going to add that same layer of washi tape to the other side of the flap to secure it to my pages. Now that flap is all taped into my journal, as an extra layer of security, I always like to add matte medium to my washi tape. Washi tape isn't the most sticky tape, we know that, so adding some matte medium down on top of it helps it to add a little bit more security to it, give it a little bit more integrity. And I'm also adding some gesso to it to disguise it a little bit, and I'm adding gesso to the edges of my flap as well where I cut to protect those edges because they're raw and I wasn't sure how they would like soak up paint as I added to it. So I'm adding a little gesso to those as well as on that washi tape. And here I am adding that matte medium to the other side of my flap, and I'm going to add some gesso here as well. As I'm working, I'm always thinking about what I'm going to do next, what my pages need, where I should go, and I had finally talked myself into the fact that I need another flap. I just needed it to be even. I didn't know how to do that, so I grabbed another journal of the same type and ripped a page out of it. And now I'm going to gesso that page black on both sides, front and back. In all honesty, I really didn't want to add another page to my spread because this was going to mean more work and more pages to decorate, and I wasn't sure like how I was going to decorate these, but I felt they needed to be black to add a contrast. So once that gesso dried, I put them in my journal and kind of like looked at it and tried to figure out how I wanted to add these without like having to do a lot of extra arting on them. And so I traced that triangle on there and cut it out to create that same flap that I was copying from the right side, and kind of like in my brain here trying to figure out again how to like add them to my spread to make it look cohesive. And I'm loving this stark black, but I feel like it needs something on it again to like blend in with my journal pages. And I finally figured out that I wanted to stencil on them with that same stencil. I forgot to record it, but I flipped the stencil in reverse so it's backwards, and then stenciled with the white spray paint instead of the black. So it's like a completely opposite contrast of that original stenciling that I did. So that spray paint is dry, and I'm putting these into my journal where I'm wanting to like attach them, and I'm thinking the white is like too much of a contrast. It's not grungy enough. It's like too stark and doesn't exactly match my pages. I like it, but it's too much. So I grabbed that black gesso again, and I'm just spreading it on these pages to kind of push that white spray paint to the background, kind of like I've done all along, that push and pull of bringing things forward and pushing things back to create like an eye-pleasing, like full spread of elements that don't like totally jump out at you, but the background becomes really pleasing. That white just jumped out a little bit too much, so I'm toning it down with some watered down black gesso on both sides. And now that that added gesso is dry, I'm going to tuck these back in my journal again and see if that helps. And it sure did. Adding that extra black on the pages pushed that white away a little bit, kept it there, made it grungy, and it looks so much better in these on this journal. So now I'm going to use that same process of that washi tape, securing it to my journal pages, front and back of the flap, front and back of the page that I'm adding. I actually forget to add the matte medium, and I'll add that in just a little bit, but then I did forget to also add the gesso, which in the end looks okay. I kind of wish I would have remembered. I thought about it in the very end when I was photographing my journal, but it's okay, no problem. Here I am adding that center page, same process, the washi tape in the front and the back of the page. So since I've decided this is going to be a completely like black and white and gray monochromatic journal spread, I looked through my old photos and some of them just had too much yellowing in them. So I grabbed these Tim Holtz photos, which are completely black and white and absolutely perfect for my journal pages. I looked through the people and I didn't know what I wanted to do and found these houses and I really liked them. So I'm using them as the focal point or the added interest to my journal pages. You can kind of see my process here. I put the photo down, used a pencil to trace it, cut it out, cut the photo out, and hopefully the video is a little bit better than my explanation. I'm going to use the same process on the other flap, and hopefully that will make sense and I can explain it a little bit better. I'm sticking it all down with the Dina Wakley heavy gel, and again, this is another tedious process of waiting for things to dry until I get to the next one. I did end up using a little bit of charcoal on it to also grunge it up as well. I like how you can see the contrast there, the left and the right. The right has some of that charcoal on, the left doesn't. I'm going to add some charcoal to that left side to kind of like push that stark white to the background and make it look like it blends into the page a little bit. And once that house is stuck down, I'm going to use that same process to add another house to the right side. I'm using a pencil, tracing it, cutting it out, and then I'm going to cut the house out of the other part and add it to my flap. In the process of doing this, that washi tape was coming up and it reminded me that I had forgotten to add that matte medium, the super important part so that the washi tape doesn't come up. So I did add that matte medium. This is another photo I grabbed. I decided to cut it in thirds in a way because there were kind of like 3 houses in it. So this part, this left part of the photo has one house. I'm adding it to the flap. This part has kind of 2 houses in it, so I'm adding it to the other part of the flap. First I secured it with washi, and I'm going to trace that triangle out of it, cut it out, and add it to this flap, and then the triangle part to another flap you'll see in just a minute. So here's where I'm going to share kind of a little bit of my thoughts and process or kind of intention behind this. I didn't know what I was doing in the beginning, but as I was working on it, it reminded me so much of my love for typography, for newspaper and yearbook. When I first went to the university, I majored in journalism because I thought that that's what I was called to do, but in the end I realized that it was the layout and the design, the typography and the creative part about journalism I liked more than the writing part and interviewing people. And so I changed my major to art so I could do more of like layout design kind of things. And so that's journal spread is totally reminding me of that. The pictures, the background, the big fonts and graphics is like totally my love language. And now I'm adding those big graphics in these Tim Holtz I forget what they're called, it'll be linked below, but they're really thick cardboard, and so I didn't want that thick, so I'm peeling the words separate from the background. I actually learned this from Laura, so thank you, Laura, for doing that. And I'm adding them to my journal pages. Again, another long process because I'm having to hold them in each time to make sure they stick. But you can see I added all of those words to my pages. And here is my actual real fountain pen I grabbed from my little jar of fountain pens. This one has the Noodler's black ink in it. I'm also grabbing some of my favorite Tim Holtz stamps. I'm not sure which ones I'm going to use, so I grabbed a pile. I'll have the list of my favorites linked below, along with all of these stamps. So now I'm just adding some of the final touches to my pages. I thought I needed another layer of interest, so to speak, on some of these pages that didn't have photos or anything else on them. So I'm going to add some stamps to them. I'm also going to add some stamps on the photos themselves, which you'll see in a minute. I'm going to add another letter stamp for some more texture in the background, just adding some more layers of interest to kind of make your eye just really look at these pages and wonder like how these layers came to be, which is my favorite part about looking at art in museums. I love to just glance at mixed media artwork and figure out how the artist like got those layers there and what order and where they came from. So that's the part I'm adding here now, is like the mystery and the mixed media. So after adding some more texture to the background, now I'm going to begin the process of adding some texture on those photos. I'm just adding little bits and pieces of different stamps to kind of bring that background forward, to kind of like add some more grunge and texture to the photos themselves. And now I'm just adding one more really small layer of texture to some of these pages, just some black letters to kind of like another like fool the eye kind of layer. I wanted some texture on these black pages and a couple other spots, that one on the left, that I felt like just needed another strong element because there just wasn't a lot of interest on the pages. So I'm using these letters to create just a little bit more interest and texture. now I'm picking up my fountain pen to do one final layer of doodling and some spots that I thought needed just a little bit more interest. I guess technically it's not doodling, it's like illegible writing, because I am kind of writing like the alphabet and different words out, just scratchy scribbles here and there. And now my final layer to bring everything together, I'm going to add some Bombay India ink drops to all over the journal. I'm really intentional though about where I add these. I'm using them to add movement, to bring your eye around, to kind of tie that stamping in a little bit more to the photo. There's specific spots I'm wanting to focus on, but you can watch as the drips drop on the pages, how it starts to really bring the layers together. I also put some of the India ink on my little acrylic block there, and I'm using it to splatter or add some intentional drops. Once those first drops dry, I can flip my pages and add drops to the next ones. And now all that India ink splattering and drops is dry. I'm taking off those clips and looking at my pages and seeing if there's anything else I need, but I don't, and I'm calling this month's Mixed Media Menagerie completed. With that, I want to thank you so much for following along with Mixed Media Menagerie. Remind you that this is October. We only have 2 months left of Menagerie this year. We have 1 spot open for a guest artist. We have November available. If you would like to be our guest artist, just drop me a message on Instagram. There'll be a link below of the forum if you want. Super not formal. We just want to know you're interested, and in all honesty, this might be your last chance to be a Menagerie guest artist because we do not know what 2023 is going to hold for Menagerie yet. We have not made any concrete decisions. So hop on board, join us next month as a guest artist. We would love to have you. We would also love to have you participate in our October challenge. I want to see how you cut up your journal or your photos or your papers or whatever you can think of. Add some ink, some fountain pen, or some sort of pen that's like a fountain pen if you don't have one, and join us on this challenge. Be sure to hashtag it Mixed Media Menagerie and MMMOCT22 so we can find you. We would love to see how we inspire you this month. Special thank you to our guest artist Kristina this month, and also be sure to check out what she created along with Erin and Laura to inspire you to join the Mixed Media Menagerie Challenge this month. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful October.